Hello, I'm Chris Van Nest. On this episode, we travel to Philadelphia to visit a man whose words speak of brotherly love, peace, and divine intervention. Now, we catch up with renowned poet Daniel Abdulhai Moore on portraits.
A street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, aligned with houses filled with stories. Inside one of the homes, the stories are illustrated in rustic charm. A life of travel, romance, and spiritual awakening lies spelled out in this most quaint of abodes. The tchotchkes and souvenirs detail the life and times of Daniel Abdulhai Moore, a respected author and poet in his home state of California. In 1970, Moore became a Muslim and journeyed out into the world at large, traveling extensively throughout Europe and Africa. He began an ardent study of the history and teachings of the Islamic faith that continues to this day. Moore published Dawn Visions, a collection of his poetry, with City Lights Books in 1964. He would go on to direct his original stage production, Floating Lotus Magic Opera Company, in Berkeley from 1966 to 1969. But he turned his back on his passion to embrace the light that would breathe renewed verve into his docile spirit, the teachings of Allah. Returning to his writings in the 80s, Moore's work was celebrated for its extraordinary power and soul. His were the words of a visionary, a Renaissance man born in the turbulent times of Vietnam and civil unrest, came to enlighten the world with the peace of his faith through verse and song.
The heart is a white bowl of fresh, sweet peaches set in the windowsill in the sunlight. The head is a slow nod in the direction of truth. The body is a highway in a third world country in constant need of repair. The soul is an endless measure of moonlight. The soul is a white spot in a black field. The soul is a black spot in a white field. The soul is a green estuary in a shadowy area. I stand up inside the shadow of the soul. I look out through the eyes of no one. The seeing is God's. What is seen by his seeing is visible proof of his existence. The sunlight, the white bowl of fresh peaches sits in. The white bowl of peaches, and the ray of yellow sunlight in which the white bowl of sweet peaches sits.
I'm going to run upstairs and get a bowl of peaches.
That was it. That's the bowl of peaches there. The bowl of peaches made of words. Daniel Abdulhai Moore. I am born in Oakland, California, the birthplace of such people as Jack London. I think Gertrude Stein lived there briefly. Robert Duncan, great American poet that very few people know anything about. I was a poet before I became Muslim, and I'd had the fortune of having a couple of books published by a somewhat reputable company, City Lights in San Francisco. When I was 24 and when I was, 1972, what was I, 32? And that was very nice. And I'd had a theater company for 3 years where I wrote the text and they were poetry. And so I had had some life as a poet before that.
I was a student at the University of California in Berkeley in the art department there. And Abdul Hai was very famous at that time in Berkeley in our crowd. He really was very revered because he was the director of the Floating Lotus Magic Opera Company, which was this really amazing alternative theater group that was extremely popular. It was an outdoor theater, and those of us in the community, you know, we would help out in whatever ways we could. And I remember that I used to paint scenery and little props and things like that. Like I do remember painting flames that were cut out of cardboard and they were pasted onto the dancers' ankles and things like that. And it was very colorful and based on Tibetan things, etc.
The 60s was an amazing time. It was experimental. People were trying very hard to shed prejudices and narrownesses and materialism and all these things to find a new way of looking at the world. And I think it was very rich. I mean, you had all the civil rights movements, you had all the, you know, there were a lot of revolutions going on at the same time. And it's true that some people are locked in it and haven't changed much, and their philosophy tends to be a little on the corny side, even though it's supposedly very, you know, enlightened. But it's sort of enlightened slogans rather than real serious stuff. So I'm grateful that in a way the next revolutionary step was open to me to take after the 60s. I was never a hippie. I was always too old to be a hippie, and I was too young to be a beatnik. The beatniks like Allen Ginsberg and, you know, Gregory Corso, and well, Ferlinghetti was never a beatnik, Michael McClure. They weren't even real beatniks. They were actually poets. But the whole beatnik thing that happened was kind of gone by the time I was born in 1940, so they were beatniks in the 50s. And by the time the 60s came, it was hippies, but I was already like 20, and then I became 30, and it was like the hippie world was all these young kids. So I was always kind of in the intermediate stage. And I became Muslim in well, there's some dispute. My friend I became Muslim with, Hakim, insists it's 1969. For a long time I was saying it was 1970, but I think he's right. And I was around 30 years old. And I became Muslim in part of the tariqah in Morocco. Our sheikh was in Morocco, Sheikh Muhammad ibn al-Habib, rahimullah, who was then around 106 or 7 years old. And so we became Muslim, learned Islam, started doing the prayer. I fasted Ramadan pretty much after I became Muslim, and then we went to London and stayed there for a few months, and then took vans and cars, drove down through France and Spain, and went across the Straits of Gibraltar into Morocco and Tangier, went to Meknes where his Zawiya, his center was, and went to a Mawlid of the Prophet's birthday, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then after that was a Musem, which was a celebration of the Sheikh. And we were there for, I think, for maybe a month, traveling around, visiting some of the disciples of the Sheikh. And then we moved back to London, went back to London and stayed there for many months. Actually, it turned out to be years, but I think we stayed there for a number of months before we went back to Berkeley and had a summer Zawiya where we called people to Islam and to Sufism, and that's when my wife knocked on a door very soon after that and became Muslim.
I remember I used to smoke, you know, so I was smoking a cigarette, and then I looked at the cigarette in my hand and I said, you know what? I am never going to smoke again. This is disgusting. And I just threw that cigarette out. And it was right in front of the Zawiya there. And I went on the door and I knocked.
Theirs is a love story for the ages. Malaka and Daniel do not merely enjoy each other's company. They enjoy each other. They are each other's best friend, harshest critic, and truest confidant.
The saint sat at the window and became the window. That's what saints do. And the saint went out the window and became the air. That's how they are. Animals feeding on the mountainside saw the saint pass. They've got the eyes for it. The mountainside felt the saint pass, and her grasses bent aside. That's how saints go. On a saint's errand, all things in place for the remedy to arrive, on time as always. The 12 ducklings and the Chinese child felt instantly renewed. though the saint barely touched them. Back before supper, the saint wasn't missed. The place settings glimmered as usual. Our earth is in need of them. Our hearts are in need of them. God, keep them at our side.
Oh, it is so nice to be married to a poet. I have a huge box upstairs. It's my archive of anniversary, birthday, and Valentine's Day cards and poems that I have received through the years, and it's just really very nice. I highly recommend it, you know. Ladies, marry a poet. It's the best, you know.
A poet who does the dishes, even better.
Now, some people probably would object to men washing dishes, you know, but actually, washing dishes is not for the squeamish. Washing dishes is for the warriors. And actually, it's a part of the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ. I think he washed dishes. It's also a great tradition of the Zen Buddhists who wash their own bowls. The monks always wash their own bowls. And it's part of the Sufi tradition of, you know, not leaving any traces behind and in fact making things better than the way you found them. So I have no embarrassment or shame about washing my dishes. If I've been eating off of them, I might as well wash them clean, getting ready for the next one.
Between the poetry and the music, Abdul Hai has still found time for that which gives a life meaning, a family.
We have 3 children. One of them lives with his wife in Istanbul, in Turkey, and is a graphic artist. And he does a lot of work for me. He did my website, designed my website, and has designed a recent ad for my books, the Ecstatic Exchange series that was in Islamica and is hopefully going to be used again. So we're in contact all the time. And then there's Farid, who's 28. Is Mukhtar 30? I think he's 30 or 31. Farid is 28 recently, and he is a business guy who is doing really well in Zurich, Switzerland, and we talk with iChat and on the telephone, and he comes and visits often, and he's doing really well. And although he's not an artist per se, he definitely has an artist temperament in some ways. And Baji, our sheikh, said that he has, in his heart, he's really miskeen. He's a poor, he understands poverty in the sense that, although he didn't want it for himself, he kind of, in a sense, he's very simple and is happy with whatever he's given, which is really a blessing. He's a sweet man, and I raised him from the time he was 2.
My dad rebelled against the corporate life, the life of, what's the word I'm looking for, Dad? You got it. Okay, I hear the life of materialistic world,
Capitalistic.
the consumer world, capitalist world,
Republican.
And, yeah, well, I have to say Republican because that doesn't work.
That's not true. It's not
where
true.
I'm going with this. But you know, for me, I rejected the free world of the free-thinking poet and the anti-materialistic world, and I've embraced materialism to a point in which I've abandoned my country and gone to Switzerland in the pursuit of.
And then there is the blossom on the Moore family tree. Born with her father's face, the youngest Moore travels the mercurial path of the artist.
And then Sally has our daughter, and she just graduated from Temple with honors, and we're very proud of her. And she's like us, like she's very much the artist, and plays the mandolin, and she's working it all out.
The piece of coal that wanted to be diamond said to the earth, press me. The succulent grape that wanted to be wine said to the feet, crush me. The cloud that wanted to be thunder and rain said to a facing cloud, collide with me. The mountain that wanted to be level valley said to the elements, erode me. The oyster that wanted to produce a pearl said to a sand grain, irritate me. The heart that wanted to be filled with light said to the world, break me.
It's not uncommon for a lazy afternoon at the moors to become a day filled with old acquaintances and cherished family friends.
Welcome, welcome. Hi, how are you? Please sit down.
Please sit down.
We were just reading some poems. Very good.
I'm going to go up and get something.
All right. Nice to see you too.
So you've just come from Washington?
Yeah, from DC.
Great.
So thought I'd drop by and see you before I went up to Intisar's and see the kids.
Very nice. Let me get some glasses.
Okay. Can I help with anything?
No.
My name is Omar bin Halim. I live in Dallas, Texas. And I've known Abdul Hayy for quite a while now. I think it's been, 15, 20 years? 20 years, something, yeah, easily 20 years. We met in San Antonio, Texas. We were both attending a conference on tasawwuf. And I was living in San Antonio where the conference had been organized, and Abdul Hayy was visiting from England where he was living at the time. We met there and became friends. I've always enjoyed people with a sense of humor, and he really has a very, very highly refined sense of the macabre and of the strange, and I really enjoyed that.
Off you go. Off. Yeah, I'll put you on this chair. How's that?
It just blows my mind, just the range of the imagination. He goes places, whether it's outer space or the, grapes talking or saying crush me or break me, or mountains saying erode me. It really is. It's a really great illustration of the ayah of the Quran where Allah says that all of creation will witness, and in a way, I really enjoy that in Aisha Abdul Hayy's poetry, because mountains talk and people talk and animals talk, and that's really nice.
Well, the two that I published before I was Muslim, and some chapbooks that I published when I was in Santa Barbara in the 80s. And then lately I have been happily publishing the Ecstatic Exchange series. And I have 7 books now, and I'm just going to do more. I have 56 manuscripts. That's a lot. And when I was in Paris, I went to a museum of Gustave Moreau, a great painter, a great symbolist painter, and where he'd left all his paintings to posterity for people to study, and this great museum of his things. And when I left there, I realized I had to actually get my works in print. Cobalt Blue. May I read this poem to you? Cobalt Blue?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Cobalt Blue, whose very name alone would make me a believer, but whose color in transparent glass against light from a window lifts the mind to a fantasy of deep darkness, of sea depths, undersides of sunken hulls, treasure, deep-sea tropical caverns, night. But night, the holy radiance, cloisters, Mediterranean monasteries, Greek bottles on high walls overlooking.
For me, it's to do with beauty. We must, in this world of difficulty and darkness and people being depressed and the hardships of this life, we have to have someone to remind us of just the intricacies of Allah's manifestation in beauty. And for me, that's one of the main things that Allah's poems do.
the hope is to see Allah and to carry on. You know, when we pray and face the Qibla, we're really praying all the way through this world to the next world. It's not like the Sirat al-Mustaqim goes all the way through death. So death is really only a door. When our Sheikh Muhammad ibn Habib was dying, he was on his way to Hajj. He was in Algeria, and they had built a special zawiyah for him to inaugurate. And when he went to inaugurate it, he got him a cold or pneumonia or something, and he was dying. And one of the people that was his companions on this journey was going back and forth very nervously and very upset because his sheikh was dying. And it was a very powerful thing. And Sheikh Ibn Habib said, "Don't worry about us." He said, "For us, dying is like going from one compartment in a train to another." So hopefully that's the situation. It's not like a matter of fear, although one might fear the manner in which you die. I mean, I'd rather not die in a car accident or having a piano fall on me or falling into a ditch or being bombed. That doesn't sound like fun. But basically, death is part of life, and the more we recognize that, I think the more we become rich in our experience. And Mark Twain said something about, again, in words to the effect that if you know you're going to be executed tomorrow, it has an amazing way of focusing your thoughts. You know, it's like a way of concentrating your mind.
Like Abdu'l-Hadi always says, death is the bread and butter of poets. You know, it's like when all else fails, contemplate death and you will get inspiration, you know. And, you know, this is the world of the opposites here. And I think that in order to truly feel alive, you have to remember death. You know, so I think that's a very big aspect of Abdu'l-Hadi's inspiration.
The Prophet ﷺ did tell us about death. The Sufis do tell us about death. And Islam does very clearly tell us about death. And it seems like it's an amazing experience. I mean, it's part of our soul's journey.
His faith in Islam provides a fulcrum for Abdu'l-Hadi's art and a balance for life, on earth and beyond.
This is a poem called "The Prophet Muhammad Arose One Morning." I wrote it on the airplane to a celebration of the Prophet's birthday in April of this year, on the 29th of April, a great Mawlid at Wembley Auditorium in London. And it was in anticipation of the event on the airplane that I wrote the poem. And I often find myself writing a poem on an airplane with great urgency because I think I'm going to die and the plane's going to fall out of the sky, or, you know, this is like my last great whatever. So this is called "The Prophet Muhammad Arose One Morning." The Prophet Muhammad arose one morning, and by evening it was obvious he was no ordinary mortal. He was a heart that spoke to a mouth that spoke to the ears of multitudes. And it was our hearts that heard him through the dust and blood of time and its wrenchings, its smooth valleys and its sudden explosions, its disappearance and its appearance again as faces at a window asking to be let in to Allah's portico facing the radiant light of the central breath. I'm aloft in the air with these thoughts, in the thrill of a fuselage heading east, confounded by the possibility of it as we float forward without entirely evaporating in space, as buoyant as a bubble propelled by a superior force. He came down from the cave, changed utterly. All the years of the world suddenly folded into him, literally speaking of those to come through those who'd gone before, from first to last, in the perfect order of grammatical tones and spectacular intonations. The light of his face goes before this airplane in the dark. The light of his star goes before this planet as its anchoring beam. The light of his heart in our hearts is what makes us sane. I'm not really running after fame or all of that, and at some point you have to almost stop running after acceptance and just do it for God. So inshallah.
It is this respect for history that keeps Moore going. His writings are always in demand and always in print. He still orchestrates poetry events in and around Philadelphia and New York. Moore documents the enlightenment that he has found in the Quran in every verse, so that those who follow him will learn what life has taught him, an appreciation for divinity. The teachings of his faith resonate in Moore's words, turning poetry into a psalm for the reader.
And yet the students would gain from them, inshallah, and people would be able to hear hopefully some truth in them.
Daniel Abdulhai Moore is a rare bird in the world today, a man who is completely at peace with his life. His is a life to be celebrated and emulated by us for all of its adherence to faith, devotion to family, and cherishing life. That does it for us. Join us next time as we take time to admire another of life's great portraits. Till then, be well.